There's an ultimate sadness to life that cannot go unsaid, that once said delivers not a soul. We feel it wherein we do not think it, or think it proximately without referring it back to a location, or without being able to do so. Surely we do not bother to link any thought in passing to an emotion of intensity. Thought, anyway, we expect should stay long enough in sight to enter and be a part of that feeling it wreaks in us after the fact. Less so if it were the other way around, that whatever thought antagonized to mind by sadness were of so harrowing an effect as to be necessarily remote from individual experience. Ultimately, there's a manner of disconnect there whether one does or does not bother. At the same time, we might unconsciously link thought and feeling, extract from either or a sense of déjà vu, rather a kind of familiar insight as regards the feeling, the thought, but an insight which in one moment might swiftly dissolve. There's a lack of effort in not bothering to understand the connection nonetheless, and that is the fault of the individual. There's another in allowing external forces to keep us from an understanding as such, and this is the fault of the circumstance, somewhat the fault of whoever individual one might speak of, depending on the severity of circumstance and the disposition of that individual. The latter is the focus here in that its consequences suggest a lack of free will as much as a lack of effort, and yet a lack of free will as this does not necessarily oblige the possibility of fate. So then the train of thought to be outlined irregularly, though it be not a statement on the nature of free will, relies on what statements of that kind might yield, if any could make one, which it all comes close to wrangling such a puzzling philosophical chimera. So then it is better to classify this attempt as being a brief dissection of what is continually rendering us powerless, of what it is tampering with, or rather altering forever, that highly personalized solipsism connate with the human animal, why that animal must at times feel powerless. First of all, the lack of effort on our part, as well as the breadth of control these external forces have over us and use against us, at the end of the day, are both equally the result of some unexplainable disqualification of the soul, or rather some inmost thing in us. That is to say, it is our fault that we banish ourselves from ourselves. Thought sadness from feeling sadness. This would not and should not even be a problem, save that we react to things and have things to fight for. Had we not denied ourselves these rights of life in the face of what seemingly would take them away from us, they would not be taken away from us. We give up such things to placate the circumstance, and in so doing lie to ourselves and perjure our freedoms, ironically for the sake of achieving success. There's a judge. Precipitates the ruin of all the thinking kind, and yet we can choose whether we shall be ruined or shall carry on. It is the environment that is consumptive because it is the ether through which external forces move. The best of us game to corrupt those forces. We fail. And yet any personality at all inevitably will augment itself, at least in the moment, to suit this environment of pressure, this inferno. It is our way of adapting. Perception is instigated out of sync, or at the least with poor timing, as to the release of that passionate existential sadness aforesaid. This topic as it is would be more than enough to set the tone for a general misunderstanding of the earth and heavens. And this misunderstanding, more than anything else, is the prime use and meaning of and for this short work. In foolhardiness, these two things of the psyche, thought, feeling, prove no candidates for homeostasis as such, and do not live together in any sort of psychological or philosophical harmony, preferring to rely on the chaos of their elements, as abstractions often prefer to contrive at the most clumsy half meaning. And yet, though it be split halfway and missing a few pieces here and there, the meaning will remain quite beyond the words, which themselves each one seem to me, even now, is like some viscous, unlikely thing wrought into confluence as the spawn of a poor mind, an infinite mess of ideas and petty subjects. And yet, truly, such things are from the firmest depths of my proud mindlessness, are the rude and somewhat beautiful things belched from out the stomach of my own vulgar enthusiasm and a priori convictions. So as to charge the psyche, we set its wake afire, and furl the light out on that elusiveness, that strange, elusive, though intimately sensed anomaly, thought or sensation, depending on what preceded what, yet both as without a place, and do not recognize whatever happened in us, as being what we have perhaps felt a while in our blood. It is a feeling felt a while, and that runs throughout our brains as blood, and pools as blood to the center of our hearts, and which once at the point of a final stillness, death, rivers out through arteries to flood our very limbs. And by that heady vascular thrum we are fed and disperse abstractions throughout all nooks. We find ourselves deep to the farthest vessel with inspiration, are flush with inspiration, droning in and out, for all the created world, and prove ourselves aware of the fact that we are as truly, utterly mortal as we had been. It must be kept in mind, in most cases clung to desperately, that we are and remain, despite our frail hearts and brains, a whole system of humors, and feel life at the fingertips as much as at the center of mind is a clarity. Yet despite movement, it is, the feeling is, the thought is, more than anything else, a momentary blockage or near embolism to thwart those passions, those beating valves, though beating weak. It tells death to us without giving us death. This feeling, this thought, needing to mingle, in which are eternally left alienated and apart from one another, at least regarding this particular problem of existence. But it is not sadness, save its after effect, and is more, in the moment it is noticed by us, a trouble, an itch, a confusion, inspired by and for to rectify this thwartedness, this impotence of expression. The idea of such a thing is quite scary, that is, if one takes the route of collapsing the particular problem of existence into itself, as if it were a neutron star, bunching reason and reason's subject into a compact lump sum. That is the problem, though. A reaching for reason to be mingled with the Most High, that is as much sublime as it is frustrating. After all, reason is an attachment. It is in need of a midwife. It is an attempt to not sink too deeply into extraneous passion. Rather, we curtail the world into sense made or somewhat made, leaving it at that, and the matter finished, despite whether a commensurate detailing of that stock of life is made or made somewhat. There is a precipice, hangs in a void out at the edge of our minds, and it threatens to consume us, coaxing the curious folk on this planet with false beatitude or a single voyage to truth, running up through dark canyons to the summit of that cracked and terrible mesa. By the inevitability of our own forgetting, we lament what we can that has passed through the string of events laying within a given minute, hour, day, after the feeling or sensing of the inexpressible. And let that tempt us into falling yet again into this void that had been waiting to swallow us. What is meant to be said is that each second we are either on the ledge, pushing ourselves back up out of this disturbing blackness, or giving yet one more part of ourselves to it, until life has left us with one keepsake that we have never given up, will never give up. And we die for it promptly. This is why there is dignity in the search of a foremost place, because it makes hope explicit, a wonder that is within all individuals and that shows no discrimination amongst good people. It is an inverted sort of dignity, however, that beating out all peremptory and manic in the hearts of men is not so much attempting and failing, and is more the fallout of that failure, and that with its odorless toxin will once again bear me forth back into the vortex. It accounts for more than a mere portion of suffering, and yet is not called suffering, because hope and possibility remain as they do on earth, unchanging and unchangeable. But the hope and the reaching are wholly different, just as the thought and the feeling of an ultimate sadness might be separated by the simple passing of time. Moreover, it is an illusion of hope anyway, as it is in the novels and diaries of Kafka. I imagine it as a severe, unthinkable wound, a severely large wound across the chests of the thinking kind, needing to be cauterized. But this is not to say that life is only sad, or that such a complete emptiness is beyond fathoming, however, and if otherwise would evoke no feeling. An Emersonian oversoul breathes through the intellect as genius and the will as virtue. His words, not mine. But if there is a virtuous man, there is an immoral one. And if sadness could exist, or suffering could exist as the thing inexpressible that must be crucially expressed, then no contrary would fit its purpose, however it were juxtaposed. It is due to the fact that such a sadness as I mention here is not of so fine a caliber as to be at the extremity of two poles, but rather is between either one. That is, at a point when the feeling is balanced on the threshold of that fantastical place where one becomes the other. But it involves not one nor the other, besides that such a point is placed on a string going between these extremities. We then can only identify the threshold as something very different, outside of the circumference it is within, and that connects both dualities. in human mind, if something is not clear, it is either abstract and unsayable, or sayable and concrete, but outside of the immediate chemistry of a given experience. So then, if what is implicit in a feeling is a concrete root, that root will not be known, or will be known, after the fact, in a different circumstance, and thus will be rendered unuseful. If it were that we did not have the tools, perhaps then we would understand it as unsayable and given to philosophical barriers. But we do. We do have the tools. We've always had the tools. Don't discount this as some evil namelessness, as so many others have done, but rather offer some contrite thing to those others, some pumping of the muscle towards a senseless fucking peace, to those who torture life to fit their own demoralizing perception, those who give up. And that's what it comes to, really. Why? There's no why. There's only what comes. What comes to. What comes to those arriving at that foremost place. And if I were not any better equipped, during life as after life, to say what needs saying, then this problem would be most definitely impossible to solve. Beat on, heart. Beat on in strength. Go in strength towards the grave of your ignorant vessel. Go beyond confusion and solve the riddle merely by the length of your quietus in a given heart that has held their keep too long and too close. Come for all humanity in blessed segments, and beat your irregular hinting on for those conscious enough to feel that death before it is consummate in them, as it will be for all us.